Avenge Sanje, Ruba, Sho, La Dana Mimida Miaji, Boda Jajana, Chula Chava Chava, Sanje Sumbara, the Chishin, the Veggie, Vajata Sajet, and Bechin, Diri, Jiris, Vegetation, Jesavidi, Tenjin, Java de la Chula, the Jango, developing Jessus, made a bit and Levatula, two Sonia. Namo la la kwata lu dan ni chang ga du da da me ga nan da ro ku ye da na che sa ba tam je ka do da ge che de do kang ge ngo de ju na mo ngo me ba ni de so yi xi ni me san me ja be me de la cha za lo o la zo da ani lo ben ba yu ba wo yin ba ye sa so kan xi ge wei chu ba yi ga wa chan me ji to ne de ni mo be so nam de de 就在咱们没少把人，人家邻居创办的喇叭道白拉东西，估计来给老人把钱那样的他们就是说那些钱呢，那第一个搞的中国人是呢，看些各位出边没搞啊产没给他们呢，是俺让的，俺那谈就给单上不个女的，才让俺嘛，俺俺让做的，大就我就把어 밑에 미니 다 텐데기 저왕에 가사기 아니 처음에 볼 까와 아니 까와 사비라 때네 아니 차량아마기 까와 사비 되부텔라 아니 다리 다족을 미디안지 토바리 다족을 때 캐버전데 가시 개회 주바에 까와 참에 이 톰네 서와 다 드니 때 캐버제 드니 토요와레데 아니 때 토네 다 가상 간이 좋아하는 하시네 전에 tension 된데 예바가 와다 된디端에 tension 뭐 간대지 좀 나야 아니 누쳐봐라 어다 tension 못했다 무주바 가시 개회 주비 가와 참매지 되는 몸배 소남들이 준세자면 미서봐 소남 시원에 개와라 주배 로 어서는 가르래 선다 만달라 치마 온도 현재기 온도 원디오 고마텐데 지주제기 안에 배소나 미소봐 엘레 타바다 탐제치바 파샤네 아 어텐데기 몸 배소나 주세장 미소바데 엔다 가리지레 벨라 레진린진 총반에 라바도베 란짐친 세가라 림부지 린도 침버기 안에 총바데 림부지 랭가 친이 안에 림부지 마샤바 말람바 안에데 가서래 림보제 말아봐 현지 안에 배 고코데 현나코데 안에 추로데 잠바 라바똥발라 배 체전에 안에 추로바 나시레 세린진 로데 린진 총반에 라바도베라 람진신스 그지 레지 람메바 체내 안에 토면주 세가라 단 미국 저번 그 추좀 마좀 봐라 개와죠 메나 아니 개와 치마 오늘 리텐데 토고 말에 다디 송아야 말. 야.
So here there is a verse by Lobon Powell, forgetting the name in English. So here in this verse, he says that in order to get this life that we have right now, this life of leisures and opportunities, we must have accumulated a great deal of merit in our past lives. So during all of the times that we've cycled through samsara and been gaining merit, we have taken rebirths all the way from being a universal emperor and so forth. But the virtues that we accumulated now to be able to have this very precious human rebirth, this is something that is greatly meaningful and difficult to find. And so we should use this situation that we have now, this life, in order to accomplish a meaningful goal. If we don't do that, it's like having traveled to an island filled with jewels, and instead of actually bringing any of those back, we just return empty-handed. So this life that we have now, we must have accumulated merit for countless eons to be able to experience this situation right now. This is something that is extremely difficult to find, and when we do find it, it's something that is greatly meaningful, highly valuable. So we should use this situation that we have now, leaving aside accomplishing the state of liberation or omniscience. We should at least least be working towards gaining a good rebirth in the future, abandoning the 10 non-virtuous actions and engaging in virtue such that we can have a good rebirth in the future. If we don't, at the very minimum, use this life for that kind of a purpose, it's as if we had gone to some sort of faraway island that has all sorts of jewels and riches, but others had like deceived us or something happened such that we end up returning with empty hands. So rather than let this life go to waste, we should use it for something meaningful while we have this opportunity.
Oh yeah, then 인자다 가서 그래. 달에 아니 세랑아마기 아니 라나 안디게와 집이 그다 기사보다 대사바기 제부들라 땡쳐봐자 되는지 녀바데 다 변다 시와나시 쳐라서 마소바 아니 가서 님보련 거와 님보련 변나나야 님보 쳐대 아니 가서래 아니 가 자주 남지 말라봐야 태삼 체네 아니 태삼 체네 많이 쳐주죠. 막에 삼전지 텐데 아니 토자라는 뭐 양다바 조회 산세지 고마 토바 쳐고에 어 대체발라 아니 토제기람 아니 냠술련 거와 대체발 냠술련 발라 시어고 봐 인자 담 마보시 뭐가체 대체도 쳐주죠. 삼제 탐제 토자라는 뭐 양다바 조회 산세지 고마는 뭐지 지내제 토바차 대체도 아니 토제기 남선 그 안에 셀룬 샴보 사냐베 그노 군저 그런 바 아니 레바답 사답데 안다 샴바쇼 시죠.
So right now we have found this life, this support that is a result of having accumulated many, many virtues in the past in order to be able to gain this kind of life. And rather than letting it go to waste, we should use this for something meaningful, this valuable situation that we have right now. Now, the supreme sort of thing that we could do, the best, the highest kind of goal that we could achieve is that of perfect, complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings. So thinking now like this, that we are going to hear these teachings, reflect on them, and try to accomplish that path while we right now have this sort of life. So in order to be able to achieve the state of unexcelled, perfect, complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings, we have to begin by hearing the teachings, listening to these teachings, and then putting them into practice. So we should think that now we have this opportunity to listen to the teachings on the three principal aspects of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa, and we should be doing this with a thought to be able to achieve that supreme state, the state of unexcelled, perfect, complete enlightenment for the sake of all sentient beings.
Oh yeah. 다 되네 마시쇼 가상 그때 맞대 주사 봐. 다디 마시워되나. 개와 초지 마소신. 나와 안에 쓰모게 맞춰봐. 라나 랑기 년제 쓰면 맞춰봐. 리르대로 친나나 나저 삼바 좋아해. 시와 미 맞춰신. 로루와데 차이 맞동와. 리르대로 친나나 나저 삼바 좋아해. 나 고나 미제메 봐. 나 고나 미제메 봐. 나나 차제메 봐로. 아니 리르대로 친나나 나저 삼바 좋아해. 다들 대셔 마고나 특권 통도 로라 시비로라 코메 매바다 아니 신에 온간기 오메 매바로 리제대로 치나나 나저 삼반 좋아해 나 가서 짐이 매바다 저와진가 같이 말해서 저와진가 나 가서 짐이 매바다 디손저 대소 매바로 리제대로 치나나 나저 삼반 좋아해 야 미메비 미메 룸비 차부도 장보시위 말람데서 미메바게 아니 룸비 차부도 장보디 아니다 가서를 엠 장바시 균호기 장바세 세고기 장 이제다 장보시 로마비 미라와 장보시위 말람데 로위텐도 타브라쇼 테나 삼바 좋아해 제송바를 다 대럽도 주셔야
No. So then we had some of this prayer left by Jitsun Milarepa. And so to just read through this, there's not a whole lot of need for commentary. It continues saying, "No way my friends know I've gotten old. No way my sister knows I'm sick. If I can die here in this cave, my hermit's wishes have come true. No way that people know I've died. No rotting corpse that vultures spy. If I can die here in this cave, my hermit's wishes have come true. Flies will suck my meat and bones. Maggots eat tendons, ligament. If I can die here in this cave, my hermit's wishes will have come true. No footprints leading from my door. No bloodstains left here on the floor. If I can die here in this cave, my hermit's wishes have come true. No one to hold a deathbed vigil. No one to weep when I am gone. If I can die here in this cave, my hermit's wishes will have come true. No one to wonder where I went. No one who knows where I am found. If I can die here in this cave, my hermit's wishes have come true. May this death prayer of a beggar in the wild of a mountain cave come to help all living beings, then my wishes have come true."
오야 다테 가서래 니다니 첼레던 위 숭굴 안에 대다 로네 아니 셈라 마상로 단주삼바 아니 로쿠제 아니 로치스 조라 펜바요와 인자다 숭구지마 대 망방제 아니 송인바레 그러와 인자 디다장 첼레던 위 숭구인 디난 그 체제 논던 위 명아 인보대 다 가르래서나 치와미다 바참바레 와 치와미다 바참바디 예 디난 그 체제 논던 위 명아 그 인보니 인보다 보니 치와미다 바ቋ바니 인장 아니 라자 그 담보 단전예간에 림지 로장구래 로장나 아니 내도 멤버 용스 내가 단종을 송하다 되네 아니 단조 예가와데 배 가사시와 나신 전에 두당 오당 배고는 예바가와다 오종과 되네 내가 라던데 된셔와다 타주라 소와 된셔와데 아니 삼네 지 예수 아니 다 치와미다 보거나 로쿠쳐와데 연구어레 대송고엔 바레
So this is this instruction to think about death and impermanence. It says, now there is one instruction which we can call the very essence of all the teachings on how to get rid of the 8 worldly thoughts of this life. And it is this meditation on one's own impermanence and death. So this kind of meditation is essential for moving one's practice really towards the Dharma, towards actually engaging in the Dharma. And so people like us, though, must prepare our minds for this meditation by first contemplating how valuable and how hard to find our present life of leisure and fortune is. So first, one needs to train one's mind, first identifying what it is that we have now, this life of leisure and fortune, first identifying that, then seeing how difficult it is to find by means of the causes that are necessary, by means of its nature, by means of examples, and then having come to the realization, having trained our minds, habituated our minds to understand how difficult and rare and valuable this life is, then gradually we will be ripe for the realization of death. By then training our minds in this kind of sequential way, we can then come to a good understanding of the realization of death and impermanence.
오야 아니 단전 전진예 과사에게 아니 가서를 첨박구해야 되라 아니 단다 라른 뒤되나 요에게 다외된데 이신 놀았다 니라니야 봐 다래 잠시인 얘가 지라 난가 얘가 얘바가 아니 지라 난가 로단자와 추리삼네 지단 차와고 빈바차와신도 또되냐 인자인부도 인부联邦그 나중에讲련 대다자 탄대타자 대신 장차로 세가 다된 나些얘기 단조 텐진 얘가 싸와다 대신 쇠순바다를 지단 최제 려단데 주반 냠련 샤마시 용완라 안에 단조 텐진 얘가 상고래서 봐 대야 안에 다 단종의 손에 안에 다 제주를 단준소를 마소완하시 그러와 대지타와 예주나 나게 겨고 맞잖아 딜리와야 셴메도 딜라 몽바야 셴메소 다르베 쉐드브가라 혼바기 튕견 강가 가젠단 차 튕젠단 저변 갑텔라 아니 왜 딘디 타와nye 주나 다 드니 단주 취소도 마서 봐 다기 아니 결국 마셔나 만달라야 아니 개와치만 온들리된 탑체바자 토버 그 체도 아니 미그 좁은 거 처럼 마소나 아니 딜레 리와야 셴메도서 다스랑그라 리와레스라 몽바야 딜레 하바시요 마레스 아 지줄에서 만나시 대나시 전에 가제 개제 가대야 개와 타게 마셔나 매선 동화 꿈에 봐 대체다 그 지다 차라서 다랬더니 다 단조그 대산 된지 토비 가서 아니 가서래 대체와 체중 간대지 좀나야 아니 룹투에 그냥 간세 개제가 대양 개와 다게 맞잖아 개와 아니 개와 맞어봐 아니 고소 그 매게 왜래라 자소나 아니 조상 안 줘라 맞아봐 인장 아니 대세 아니 대치다 차세 어서 와나시 전에다 된속이 예수받아 지된 최제 랑대제 주바 샤마시 용와라 단조 텐제니가 꼭 그래
So the point here is that in order to rid yourself of the 8 worldly thoughts and undertake a spiritual practice which is truly pure, you need to have these realizations, the realization of the great importance or the difficulty of finding this precious human life, as well as its great value, and then recognize one's own impermanence and death in order that you really engage in a pure practice of Dharma. So as a verse says, if we don't use this life now in order to accomplish virtue, then in the future when I fall into the lower realms, what will I do then? So we shouldn't waste the opportunity that we have now. If we don't use this life towards a good virtuous purpose, if we don't try to engage in the practice by abandoning the 10 non-virtues and accomplishing virtuous actions, then what will we do in the future if we don't get this kind of situation again? So here it's saying that if one is to let this opportunity go to waste and you let yourself fall into the lower realms, well then what will you be able to do then when you are in that kind of suffering situation? So in order to really undertake a genuine spiritual practice, a genuine practice of Dharma, one needs to have recognized the great value and rarity of the life that we have now, as well as the fact that it is impermanent and we will have to die.
Oh yeah. tenni tanjo tenji nyakadang ane kasang ama shiwa nashin chare ane ten chenpo tongde zamba ane garanzo chongbaji yena che chenpo jirage yena ane che de tendu du ane tendu che de yongyi che du bezo chigirawa yinzang kasang shiwa nashin chare tenji sona temedo dawa pang sirigara ane ten tenpa de temedo madaba ane manda 아니 타바다 탐제체베 둘라 가서를 두바게 아니 둘라 전바체 단조단에 되면 다와 팡 내가 삼나 지나되다 매세 내버가 와이나 아니 랑 다가서 맞대봐 개와치마 단조지 댄 상보도 예비 텐라 아니 미그 주고 처준 송와라 소와다 유소라 두고 치마 삼나 치원 드랍체 치와 삼나 치만 드랍체 쓰가라 데니 아니 개와딜라네 가서 치와 미다바 삼니가라 아니 치 데네 개와지 렌디 삼바 아니 개와 상보지 렌그 된다라 치마데 아니 대와대바다 동안 매제 바란체서 여바 인장 치만 드베 탑카레레스나 치마 딘디 리덴 쳬바제 딘디지 이미 치도 아니 딘디 리덴 가서래 대토박이 아니 탑스를 가라 안에 가서 탑로 중국에 했으니 소나시 전에 보다 가서래 냠내 시험하시 용하라 단지 텐제 여가당 안에 치와입니다 또 밖에 와신 하고 그래
So when you recognize that this situation, this life that you have right now is greatly valuable, then you'll give up sort of pursuing meaningless activities. If you see that this situation that you have right now, you see that this is something very rare and difficult to find and also has a great value to it, then you will make effort at engaging in virtuous activities. You will put your sort of effort and energy into doing things that will be virtuous. So that first recognition that this life is very difficult to come across, that it's very rare and very valuable, you'll see that you need to use this opportunity that you have now and put effort into virtuous activities. And recognizing, thinking about the fact that you have to die, that you are impermanent, and that after this life you will have to take up another life, then that leads one to recognize that the situation that we have now, this life now, we need to make effort at creating the causes to take a good rebirth in the future. So you will, having come to recognize the value of the situation that you have and the fact that it is impermanent, then for the purpose of one's future life, for gaining a good rebirth in the future, you will make effort at avoiding the 10 non-virtues and engaging in virtuous actions. So these recognitions, these realizations are critical to have you actually engage in a pure kind of practice of Dharma.
Oh yeah. 또바 깨와시고 아니 단조 된제니가 그 깨고 또바당 아니 치와입니다. 또바 깨나 리탐제 설당 추탐제 오마 미탐제랑 그 전도 조장 아니 대다라 미고와 중내견라 안做现情把大的想把定了老百姓그래想把定了老百姓用多把天托军先都一届没晓吧是多把天团结天津那个多把天先给电把了电呢那个给别天天买人吧我特意呢让南山别告诉的用落地确实没着吧天天一张俺让给先都给推话天吧让给三中给三把大呢俺别先都9万没把去过来说的了多把天推进先都给没晓吧那个给先给俺那电把咱们来电呢上让给上了嘛都把天天给买人吧三中给写了去让三中让都给呢先都没就啊俺那谈就谈就7万没到多把接话天俺那电不行过来是
So, gaining the realization of the great rarity and value of this precious human rebirth, as well as one's own impermanence and the fact that you have to die, once you've gained these kinds of realizations, it doesn't matter. The hills can turn to gold, the rivers into milk, and every man your slave. But to you, it's all repulsive, useless, like a feast set before a sick man vomiting. So, and it's not enough for these realizations to come to you from the outside. So it's not enough to just be hearing this from someone else and temporarily give rise to a kind of sense, have a feeling about one's death and impermanence and the value and so forth. But rather, this shouldn't be something that just is sort of temporary from someone else, but rather they must come from inside, from thinking about them yourself. So the kind of realizations that we're striving after are something that come from one's own reflection on these topics, that come from within, not from some sort of external condition where you feel that while that condition's there, but rather you have to think about this again and again to give rise to a strong feeling, and then they will be firm in your mind and never change again. But if it's only due to the power of someone else outside of yourself, then these realizations won't be stable, they won't have strength to them.
Oh yeah, that didn't. 他就那个把我们家边干了爱了，俺那得啥件了有啊？那些钱呢？俺那谈就我也送啊，俺那没给我结单这个谈就我也送啊他，皮结了，俺那团吃完啥嘛？那个了等着团吃完的，他就了等着团吃完，各就买来现在团啥哇？团马什么？他就嘛就他妈听过嘛？等你也搞我3把台了呀？俺那北有过呢也把搞啊，就有过呢也把搞啊。俺那我有过呢也把搞啊， 아니 든조라 발 가서래 교육원에 예바제바라 가산 시원하신 제 운디진이 수준 내세 매세 수준 비순서 왔고 아니 가서래 수준나 바다 벌써 왔고다 든좀마 lunden즈마 아니 소소그마 삼로 땅체 아니 교육원에 예바가와 다들 뭐 직전에 뭐 등교는 메시 아니 예바가와 삼바나 담 타완이 미국바 재단 자신 셔셔발라 콤바탕세요 단조로 세대 조완이 람 미니 제시 산제지 담발라 고슈바세 다 같이 란종하다 현종 아산이 조와 주투시와다 레레시와 조완이 람 미니 제시 미니 유제 안보텔에다 마도 내라테세 란종하오데 산제 최다 단제제 담반에다 대제주 세대 아니 현종하오데 조와주 조안이 대고니 원송아 미제신세 란종아 산제지담보 고슈바 산종아 이 담보 손에가라 고슈비 슈바서 최주비 친나기 튠제 창왕 담바 대 담바세요 르덴디 치미된 주바나 산제지 공방 주바 판제를 라나 예바 텐샤와사 다디 단종을 소화되지 않더라다
No. So when one sits down to meditate on these topics, one should understand the sort of various points that come in the thinking about this. So first, there is identifying the freedoms and opportunities that we have now, the 8 states of freedom and the various sort of endowments from one's own side as well as from the side of from outside of oneself, and recognizing then that this life is greatly valuable, that we can accomplish any sort of temporary aim that we strive after, as well as the sort of ultimate aim of gaining liberation or the state of omniscience. And then one proceeds to look at the difficulty of obtaining this kind of human rebirth, looking at this from the side of the causes that are necessary, as it says in the scripture that the only way to get a good rebirth is by pure ethical conduct combined with the practice of the perfections and stainless prayers and so forth. So one thinks about these various points using scripture and reasoning in order to establish them for oneself. So here, again, in the root verses where it says leisure and fortune are hard to find. This introduces the concepts of recognizing that leisure and fortune, contemplating their incredible value both in a temporary and ultimate way, and contemplating how hard they are to find. And so here leisure is to be free from these 8 different situations where one doesn't have the freedom or the ability to practice the Dharma, and fortune refers to or endowment refers to the fact that one is fortunate enough to possess all the inner and outer circumstances that will allow him to undertake his practice. So here it only sort of lists the first of these pertaining to oneself, beginning with having taken birth as a human. So there are 5 sort of endowments or fortunes from one's own side. And then from the side of others, there is having entered the Buddha's teachings, or that there are the Buddha's teachings and so forth. So here, as one is contemplating these, one thinks through the various topics. And so here it continues, this body we live in gives us in our own 2 hands the ability to achieve everything from good things in our next life up to the state of Buddhahood itself, and thus is incredibly valuable.
Oh yeah, that 류덴디 치미된 주바네 저와 치망운디 류덴 캬바잔 주바네 산제지 공반 주바 만제 라라도 옆에 대셔가 랑글라도 옆에 dumna 랑글라나 줍투바 가서래 치망운디 류덴 단다가 나사 주베데 가르레서나 아니 대리 틈지된 주와 투명 오다 미곤자보테 다와 따도니 전에 또 뒤발아 소와나신 수르나바다베 시소 몰란처만 비 참자 지속의 초체데 아니 치만 오늘 류된 개발자도 배가 주들에 대양 아니 다리 뒤대나 땡뒤대나 좀내봐 그래와 다들 내래 탑이 현재 공방 줍제데 아니 저 가르래서나 라와수면 말에 라와수면 나네 저데 아니 수른지 라와 조림지 라와야 안에 된디라 안에 줍토바 저런 지라와 시체네 아니 등어지 지라와다 셔럽 지라와 공바야 댄디라 댄네 두 주바인장 댄디 댄나 내리 탈비 공바야 대죠 탐제 진비 공바야 댄디 댄네 두뉴바인자 셈지 도지 메예바 강연바 남지 하다 소위 님미 한미 한미미 컨디니 제 명지장 도지 메 세가라 미 때라 자주게 셈게 라와 나시지 但想把康个讲了呀，要没话印象。我他们这前面空帮主边给，主这个，俺长久个什么的，因这样每天来叫往那信息叫没话印象。我太阳俺电地在那主牛把印象。绿电地去每天主把呢，三节就空帮主把马节，俺让个让拉都也把印象，俺天下话的，
So, as it says here, this body we live in gives us in our own two hands the ability to achieve everything from good things in our next life on up to the state of Buddhahood itself, and therefore it's incredibly valuable. So it's like we have this in our own hands. It depends upon us. Right now, we have this perfect situation to be able to accomplish any sort of aim that we strive after, and it merely depends upon our own effort. So, in order to achieve a good life in the future, one needs to as it says in the scriptures, the foundation for that is keeping pure ethical conduct. And then when this is conjoined with or brought together by stainless prayers and conjoined with the practice of the 6 perfections, we are able to attain a good rebirth in the future if we work towards that goal. Or if we wish to attain the state of liberation, our own liberation from samsara, we engage in the practice of the 3 trainings. And the 3 trainings, principal among them is the foundation of ethical conduct. And so on the basis of training in ethics, one is able to then train in meditative concentration and then train in wisdom, and by that kind of process attain liberation from samsara if we put our effort into that. And if we wish, we can also attain the supreme state of omniscience. We can give rise to this attitude of bodhicitta. And among all of the different types of beings who are able to give rise to bodhicitta, humans have a particularly good ability, superior to any other. So of all the other types of beings like gods and nagas and so forth, we as humans have a unique ability to give rise to this attitude of bodhicitta and then be able to attain the state of perfect, complete enlightenment. So this all depends upon our own effort. We have this in our hands. We have this incredibly valuable situation, and if we use it, we can attain these kinds of goals.
Oh yeah. 다들 전체와대 진짜네 내가 라더니 전체와 타들토와 전체와 진짜네 단예바가와 될라야 아니 기유권에 예바가와 주주가요권에 예바가와 아니 오종가요권에 예바가와 베스가요권에 예바가와 송예배나네 기유권에 단조 토바가 주 아니 출근 남바다바 송학 신도네 거바인배 야 주출은 남바다바 권배 안에 더 단조지 단 토바양 유메 온도 마상와 더 미주마 인자 더 단조게 되냐 바양 가와 원유권은 이와지 가와 되나 아니 루시 가수 가르송 아래에서나 안도네 가서 된도네 안도 제와당 안도네 안도 제와니 아니 사치비 두다냐 바다 안도네 된도 제와니 아니 와서 지시십이 차선구 때문에 누다냐 봐서 와 나시잖니 원유권에 지링 안도라 된도 뇽 저와 현에 민용 미나네데 잡불림베 민용와 잡불림게 무기 나네자 단조도 봐 신도 뇽와 까와 오다 데데 소아인 바리와 지당 디 인자다 도르디 잡았다 소아 나시잖니 안도네 가서래 된도네 안도 제와다 안도 제와데 사치비 두다냐 봐 아니 안도네 된도 제와데 아니 디시시베 차송게서 두다냐 봐 예서 대라 아니 오유권에 예바가 와서 대송해 말에
So this body and life are difficult to find, and so it's greatly meaningful what we have now. We're able to achieve any sort of temporary or ultimate aim that we strive after, and such a body and life are difficult to find, and this is explained from 3 different points of view. So the first is this causal viewpoint. So this life that we have now with all of the freedoms and endowments is extremely difficult to find because of the cause that brings it about, which is keeping pure ethical conduct. And to guard or keep that kind of pure ethical conduct is extremely rare. So therefore, the result of a human birth like this is also extremely rare. Since the causes that bring it about are so rare, the result as well is rare. And this is also rare in terms of the nature of it. If we look just at how many beings there are in the lower realms compared with those that take good, sort of happier rebirth, there are many more in the lower realms. And it's said that those who take a rebirth from a higher rebirth to the lower realms, as well as those who are in the lower realms and again take a rebirth into the lower realms, is equal to the number of particles of dust in all of the world. Whereas those who take a rebirth from the lower realms into the upper realms is only like the number of particles of dust that fit under the fingernail of a Tathagata. So when we compare by their nature, it's much more rare to gain a kind of good rebirth as a human than it is to be in the lower realms. So it's like all of those beings who go down into the lower realms from a good rebirth, as well as those who are in the lower realms and again take birth there, is like equal to all of the particles of dust in all of the worlds. And those who go up is only like the particles of dust under the fingernail.
Oh yeah. 다 되게 오유 거는 예바가와데 신청하지. 다 되네 배유 거는 예바가와다라 안에 시위진이라 루그 시위진이라 송하나시 자조치 냐신 부가장 루바 태발래자 시륜이 미체도가와 명왕게 담제제배 된데 10월 전에 오송하나시 전에 오다 배라 배시위 거는 예바가와데라 자주치 야신 부가당서 다디버 자불림비 나냐 대체 배고는 세계 야신 부가 지바시 자주 전부 칼 아니 자주 라지 초근도 쳐와라 아니 초근도 쳐와 마인바 아니 배 가서래 시직도 되게나 아니야 야신대다 루바니 어디 테시바 대한 루바데 롱아 마이나 아니 테시바 대 루바데 롱아 임바당 야신대야 아니 자저 그 초직도 못돼봐 파파 초도 예와 대한 아니 야지지도 뜨내내와 로자를 참네 아니 자주 칼 고도담 내려 오면 정말 야신 그 부바 태바당 시다점인 바 대신도 세르와 상제지 담바 지된지 컴 현당 현도 레지 현도 레지 타와라 림바신도 타와라 랑 말이 비미 동데 아니 대배잖아요. 라 말이 비밀도도 거의 자주 되네야. 단도 세장 다른 밀리터반에 최신도 예바가와 아니 시다점 예바이 시다점시 예바이 야.
So again, by nature, there are very few human beings, and those who live in this world where there are the teachings of the Buddha are very, very few. And so this life by nature is hard to find. And then the next way that we contemplate how difficult it is to find is by means of examples. And so this is articulated in Nagarjuna's letter to a friend in a verse describing this example that is brought out here. And so it's as rare to find this kind of a human rebirth as it is for a blind turtle in this vast ocean who only rises to the surface every 100 years to put his head through this yoke or like ring that is being tossed around on the surface of the ocean. And so here it says, suppose there were a single yoke-like ring of pure gold that could float upon the surface of the great ocean. The swells of the sea push it back and forth north in every direction you can imagine. And so here, this ring is being thrown about every which way on the top of the ocean. And not only that, this turtle that lives in the depths of the ocean is blind, and he only comes up to the surface once in 100 years to poke his head up. And this example gives us the sort of likelihood of getting a rebirth as a human. So suppose that this turtle or the golden ring happens to catch him around the neck. The odds against it are nearly infinite. And so our case is much the same as this. The teachings of the Buddhas pass now and again through the planets of this universe. And here we are, blinded by our own ignorance. We are permanent inhabitants of the deepest reaches within the ocean of cyclic life. A human body, complete with the leisure and fortune, will be fantastically hard to find. The odds against it are almost infinite, but this time we have found it. So it's almost impossible that this turtle will catch the ring on his neck. But what we have right now is as if we had gotten so lucky. It's almost infinitesimally small odds that we could get this kind of body, and right now we have.
오야 탐지제배 된대 치워줘 시가나 오다 된다 배우가는 예습 가봐도 삼네 탐지제배 된대 되와 중문들이된 개발자 도박에 아니 줄라 아니 가서 유튜브에 아니 더부 최주비 대상 개발자지 아니 딘지된 개발자지 아니 누구래 세네 다 잡고 되지 삼벌에 담아인 바 탐지제배 된대 치워줘 오대나신 대양 대다 단조 대체性 你把搞吧，连就这你别搞的，但你不切不进行，我把连过不来，是，我把连过来，他看着呢，他那特别切不切两岁人吧，这两岁两把人，两把困难人，这样俺那卡说呢，这样大约的两岁两把困难人是，特别切不切两岁两把那样，两岁连这个，俺那单成绩长我就搞我一张。 안에 때 천이 참와데 안에 통마 때 천이 참와지 예 대년에 안에 대대라特别지원 요소는 거 봐이다 안에 통마 주 충이내가 세바기 아미가 주고 초등 양소련 바제 마셔고요 말에 와 양소련 바 권한이었어요.
So then this life of leisure and fortune is incredibly valuable and difficult to find. This is the first and last time we will have such a chance. And so we must now make the greatest use we can of it. And so right now, where we have all of the causes and conditions have come together and we have this kind of life, we need to at least create the causes to be able to gain this kind of rebirth, this kind of good rebirth in the future. But even more than that, the single greatest thing we can do with this life is to practice the greater way, or the Mahayana. So the way that we can take the most from this life or make it most valuable is by engaging in the practice of the Mahayana. And to begin with, we need to practice, train our mind in the stages of the path for the being of small capacity, recognizing the importance of abandoning the 10 non-virtues and keeping ethical conduct and so forth.
오야, 아니, 렘바주그 태양 타다니네 아니 냠수 말라나 렘보 미도반 아니 치와 미다바 오마인베 와 인자다 되네 치와 미다바 고야와 치와다 안 남진에 와다 치위지 최마도 가만히 참바도 마 용거와래 미다바 오 치와 챔베 로태양 아니 랑갈 치와 롱 아니 원루 시와 담당 삼바담지 치와 샤마지 챔바 원가외 아니 치와 챔바로 로시도 장고래 봐 시도 마장바나 랑갈라 아니 치와 미다부터 바 남산지에 가보시라 인장 치와 챔바 태양 로태양 랑가 치와 용루 시와 담당 삼바담지 치와 샤마 챔바시 아니 원가외 아니 치와 미다로 시도 장고래 정고 정아지 야
So then we turn to the fact that we need to begin this practice right now. So this is where we turn to the contemplation of death and impermanence. It says, "Little time remains before the inevitable death comes to us. So we must constantly bring our death to mind. Just some vague awareness that someday death will come, or thinking some about death, is not enough to really keep your mind, keep your coming death in mind." So here, it's not sufficient when we're contemplating death, and the contemplations of death are that death is inevitable, death is certain, but the time of death is uncertain, and at the time of death, the only thing that will be of benefit to us is our practice of Dharma. But this is something that we don't easily get a realization of this or a really strong sense of it. You have to train your mind again and again and really keep thinking about this in order to give a rise to a realization of one's own death and the fact that it's coming. So you must train yourself meticulously again and again in what it is to die in order to give rise to this kind of realization. This is something that is difficult to realize.
오야 다지니 치와 챔바데 가체와 인장 다 남쪽에 나가서 미답이 치와 미답이 미고든지 관된 거 와래서나 단전 얘가 첼라 로메바 셔바 아니 치와 체주 때만 말이 첼라 로메바 니네 가서 간데래서나 다 치와 챔비 파연 아니 마데메 님이 치와 챔주 뭐였을 거라 사자 숨은 차이 그러와 다 치와 챔비 파연 그 텔라야 다 sabject 마 쉬와 되지나 또 텐셔와 치와 템바르잖아 안에 계속 개조라 주바중 텐셔와다 또 쳐와다 안에 토마 가쳐와다 토마 쳐라 주바다 파도 쳐 될지거나 토마 가쳐와다 파도 가쳐와다 안에 타마 가쳐와다 시간 가시 최주바 치와 텐이 최남바 랑게 간시 주시지 주바 인자나 안에 치가 가시 조신도 치와 지간라 치와 템비 파연 주보데 마텐 대제라 치와 마잔비 예미데라 치와 마잔나 최미텐 tenjang meju zhujang namda meju an zhubala nyandan dan chawa ane rani marungwa cheba o chiwa majana ane gosun pamede chebu kumnyane rani marungwa cheba ane chiga jeshindu chigawa sege gana chiwa chebi payan chuda majanbi yemi chudi maa ngela chayin bari
So this instruction on contemplating death and impermanence is something that's very important. And here in the root text, the instruction on how to keep your mind on death is presented in the words, "life's not long." So in this verse, those words are referring to death and impermanence. And so the instruction includes a number of categories. So usually the contemplation on death begins with the benefits that come from recalling death, thinking about death, the problems that come or the disadvantages of not keeping your mind on death, and then how to actually keep your mind on death, how to think about this topic. So these contemplations, beginning with the benefits of recalling death, if we have a good remembrance of death, then this will bring greater value to our practice. It will make it more meaningful. It will also, secondly, bring greater power to our practice. We will do it with more sort of strength. And the recollection of death is something that is important in the beginning. It gets us going. It's important in the middle. It keeps us going. And it's important at the end of our practice. And finally, by remembering death, we will be able to face death with joy, with happiness, without any sort of regret or fear. So those are the benefits of recalling death. And on the other side, there are the disadvantages of failing to recall death. If we fail to recall death, then we won't recall the Dharma. We won't remember to practice. And even if we do recall the Dharma, we won't practice correctly. We won't really practice purely. And we might attempt, the second disadvantage is that we might recall the practice, or we might recall the Dharma, but we don't engage in practice. And the third is that we might try to practice, but we won't do so purely if we don't recall death. Fourthly, our practice won't be carried out in earnest. We won't really do it with a great deal of effort and sort of striving after it. And fifth is that we will develop a bad character. Without having this sense of conscientiousness, we will let our three doors do whatever sort of activities. And finally, we will feel regret at the time of death. So those are the disadvantages of not remembering death.
오야 다들이 가서 치와 전주되라 하는 거에 대라 안에 다 뭐지 자왔음 윤장고 타자바스 가서 섭취와 나시잖아요. 되라야 안에 자왔음데 내가 치와다 남징어와 매바다 치비지 최현 강 매반버서 뭐지 자왔음 제체 다 가서 뭐 섭취 윤장고 셰되라 안에 내가 치와 전바 되라야 윤장 숨 제가나 시당여와 영라 태양健康 거다 도도 매바 虽然那把没去直接拍马前就要吧，俺那顺便在去家龙买吧，俺去哇，现在我得了大军天的姐姐，我说的有看到那去哇买吧，但看这里那没小话买，去看是没小话买吧，你听得到？看到那大家想毛接受哇，人家军天过去，军天过个那当，俺去吧得了，军天什么呢？ 아니 대제라 아니 최차고와 타자바 대체 와 되는지 남진에서 말라야 아니 군대 숨체가나 질전불림비 철랑에와 매바다 그 니둥그 철랑에와 매바 이제 직체 와 치제 마신 선전 용외장 남지랑에와 매바 치규는 마마데 선배끼는 용화지 소하나지 치라 진진 나는 바 소하나지네 치제 마신 선전 용화지 직체 리시 추보다 냠충와 냠충와나 남지랑에와 매바 어 대순보지 아니 남진에와 매비 준대순보지네 뒤에네 아니 최차단이도 자고와 타자바체 是吧？咱第一节了，俺那他看说的，去去嘛都先看个样，没办法上班的啦。俺那信息破烂新吧了，人家基本学基本，特别说那么就讲那太阳没那个马点多，这个我的这学习没办，俺那刚装就给没办。 累积的没办法，信息碰见人家这边、学这边，特别说那么就讲那点么的，我这个没办法，什么的3年，你去可能去把他家把这什么钱，是吧？而且一个早晚什么的军人，你早晚什么的军人股，你他家把什么都是钱，
So, the actual contemplation of death involves first thinking about these three basic sort of principles, and then reasonings for each of those principles, and then a kind of resolve that comes out of thinking about these. So I explained these somewhat yesterday, but so the first is contemplating the certainty of death, the fact that we absolutely have to die, and the three sort of reasons that we use to contemplate this are thinking that first, death is certain to appear and cannot be turned back by any kind of means. Contemplating that our life is constantly growing shorter and there's no way to increase our life. Contemplating the certainty of death in the sense that we do not have much time to practice, even during the time that we are alive. So thinking about these reasonings, one comes to conclude that death is certain, and so therefore one needs to practice Dharma, one needs to engage in Dharma. And secondly, one contemplates the uncertainty of the time of death. So thinking through these reasons, one thinks, well, the lifespan of a person in this world is generally not determined. It could be any sort of length, but it is in particular because this is a degenerate age, this is uncertain. Then secondly, that the time of death is uncertain because the factors that contribute to death are so many and those that sustain life are very few. And finally, thinking about the reasoning for this, that the time of death is uncertain because our bodies are extremely fragile. And so thinking through those reasonings, one comes to a resolution, to a resolve, saying, I will practice the Dharma now, knowing that the time of death is uncertain. And then the final sort of principle is that when we die, nothing except for the Dharma can be of benefit to us. So all of the various things like our wealth, our friends, our family, even our body are of no use to us. Only the merit that we have accumulated, the Dharma that we have practiced, is of any use. And so there is a verse talking about this, which basically reiterates that at the time of death, even if our friends are around us, and we were surrounded by many possessions and so forth, we have to go alone, and it's only our merit that can be of benefit to us at that time of death. So this, again, we resolve then that we need to make effort at practicing the Dharma given this situation.
Oh yeah, that is a chi teacher la ane ran chi na ba kwamba asa de chi na ba kwamba de ane chi 这些就年的电他这年当把电都插完去吧，我当天这个他让去我跟那把把国外的，他去的。我去修过的国外，那么就顺便讲了，我去我国外那个啦，我去我国体检了，俺那去那个国外的国外的，说，那么告诉的。 민염 종간자이나 아니 내가 치와가 군제 선보자당 아니 대삼 대제라 아니 치외나 봐라 치외나 봐고마 어 다제신도 왜냐다 땡땡 차와라 서와 아니 류 발칼라 류 나사세네 아니 내 치도 치외 아니 텐저기다 남바마 치와 다 치외바 넘버 간제에 지고바래 되는 마 곰니 어니다 치위나 봐 곰바데 대 subject 값도 와라 되나야 남주 곰디 잠바 아니 내가 치위 곰도 곰야 임바래
So, and then one thinks about the sort of experience of death, ending with a meditation on what it's like to die, going actually through the sort of appearances and what it is to go through the process of death. Now, normally, when although in the sort of outline, this point of meditating on the experience of what it is like to die comes after all three of these. When one is actually meditating on these topics, one meditates on sort of the appearances and the experience of death at this second topic of contemplating the uncertainty of the time of death. So after contemplating that, one then turns to what the experience of death is actually like and goes through that kind of meditation. Although in the sort of outline, it comes after all three of the contemplations of the various principles of death. When one is doing this as a meditation, one thinks through that process of death after thinking about the uncertainty of the time of death.
Oh yeah, 아니 다 밀런 쪽에 가서라. 아니 다 라빈도 저라 요 하나 신이 전에 내가 집에 내가서 아니 세제가 롱든저마 얼빠 청기 괜찮아 텐시잖아 청기라 대기 아니 삼로 동게 쳐잖아 영화 템바라 팬해요 봐 그나 내가 집에 내가서 가거나 아니 스스메다 동게 된다다 저위 지시 칼라다다 저위 천주 난게 로다보 리사 법주신도 교류 조세야 되는데 용된저마 삼로 단계 쳐잖아 아니 여가 또반 깨라 팬 용되게 세제되게 왕이야 similar 영화 제다 유주제라 팬도 제요라서 스스메다 동게 된다다 저위 지시 칼라다다죠 저위 천주 난게 로다보 리사 법주신도 교류 조세 다 의쇼나 야 이쇼 다 오야 제제 대다 유신되잖아 안에 치와 제별로 남아 제디 체디 나些多把用그래서 다 단조 텐진에 가서 Teni Yunzanguda Tajava Sumjikwana, Chiwa Midaba Samjikana, Ani never Churchgava Tajavata. Ani Chetadani to Tajagavata. Ani Chiviji Chemado Shankanga Mideba, Ani Chokwana Cheva Tajane, Ani Gosum Chela Juba de Tai, Dusanguare, Chiva Temple, Temple Nama Jedi, and it said it Nasian Dodi, and you call it Gosum, and it church Juba the Yongua in that day, so said it Nasia Dobaji Chung.
So when doing this contemplation on death and impermanence, one can use scriptural quotations in order to do this kind of contemplation and thinking about it, thinking about the descriptions within the scriptures, as well as those that are establishing sort of these various points that one is meditating on. And by reflecting on these again and again, one is able to really give rise to a strong feeling about this. This is something where one needs to repeatedly contemplate it such that you give rise to a really strong feeling about this. So then after having contemplated the point of the time of death being uncertain, one turns to the fact that at the time of death, only Dharma can be of any kind of help. And so one goes through looking at the fact that one's friends and relatives, one's wealth, one's body even are not able to be of use at that time of death. There's nothing except for Dharma that is beneficial. And so a person who trains himself in these categories over a long period of time is able to develop the true attitude of keeping his mind on death, and then gains the ability to turn back his desire for the pleasures of the present life. When a person, through the process of careful contemplation, has developed this attitude of keeping his mind on his own death and impermanence, we can say the virtuous way has taken root within him. So when one has really gained an understanding, a realization of these contemplations, then one gains a sense of conscientiousness, of thinking about what one is doing with one's three doors, body, speech, and mind, and restrains one's activities and acts in accordance with that.
Oh yeah. Chiwa Midaba Temple, Samjungi Guan, Samjungi Lodi, Ani Kasore, Midaba Tobadi, Gula Gewana, Ani Chu Gejuji Gang Chu, Gejuji Gang Chu Sheva de Chunga Yin, say, O Tinita, Tene, Ani Gejula Majuba de Yungo and the Gang Chu Shin. That Digasu Didil Masumba Yizang. Ani Chiwa Midaba come to Tinzo, Ani Labrin Chemo, Labrin Sosona Pa, Gevo Yova Yinza, Ani Denima Passage, Dinagala, Ani Yabo Chiva Chajan, Denita, Omeri, Roa, Desunella, Chiva comes to town, one edge with Jamdro, Landa, so Namsa Geva, that Lamdrina Pa, Yova Yinza, Ani Lamzinaga Geva Masumbari. Chiwa comes to town, one edge with Jamdro. Landela so we Namsa Jawane Chanju Lamji Rimbala, Juma da Shio Gueve, Juma da Shio Gueve. Soon did Nandi Dunga Sambatang. That Lamzo Gaso, Nandi Dunga Sambatang. Ani or Tambala Jubuko, Ani Jamju Namsatu Yama, that Dinala. Soon did Nandi Dunga Sambata, Jamdi Chogona, Tisula was Masuja, Shula Tambara Mado, Ani was still Shula them. Subtempa Mado, was in a Masun, Case, Masuja, was a Masun, the Shula Tempa Yesung, or did that, Jinzo, Lavring Sabjan, Chani, Ani Caso, Jidenchima Chitatrova, Drovani, they do Samba, Sayagi, Ani Lavring Sabjan, Andy Dunga Sambatang. Jidenchima David Taptempa, Stella. Ani Guzosum Rachivi, Tambala Jugo, Jamdo Chang, Diretam Jago, Landela Yishi, to the Jetantizo, that Lavrin Gava Mado, there's Yabum Gava Masumba in Zang, Lavrin was a demasun, that the Lavrin among Aranzo, Yamin Nanche, Dache, and Shawachugures.
So, when a person then has developed this kind of attitude, keeping their mind on death and impermanence, then they enter into this virtuous way, or we can say the virtuous way has taken its root within him, because one then begins to really engage in virtuous activities and avoid non-virtuous activities. And so a more detailed presentation of the death meditation appears in the standard works on the steps of the path to Buddhahood. So we can find more detailed meditations on the process of death, as well as the contemplations that came before in the larger works of the stages of the path, like the great stages of the path by Lama Tsongkhapa and so forth. So this applies to other topics that are normally taught within the Lam Rim, which are not explicitly taught here in this text. So this applies as well to other topics following, such as how to go for refuge and the teaching on actions and their consequences. So here in this text, concluded our Lama, the traditional contemplations on the suffering of the lower births and the entire set of instructions about going for refuge are conveyed by implication, though not directly in the actual words of the verses. So normally in the Lam Rim outline, following the contemplations on death and impermanence, one would contemplate the nature of future lives in terms of the kind of suffering or good experiences that one could take up, and so that sort of contemplation would arise, as well as how one goes for refuge, the sort of process of going by for refuge, and then the generating faith and confidence in karma, cause and effect, and contemplating that in detail would normally appear in the Lam Rim, but here we should know that from there, they're not conveyed in the actual text, but rather by implication.
Oh yeah, donat 단전이가 첼라로 뭐 이라고 뭐 체든 나샤도 해와게 아니 체되기 아니 단저 원성하다 전체화다 예바가와다 아니 다 가서래 아니 치와 메다 봐주죠 다 준제就是메다 봐 삼발라 때네 아니 체디 나샤도네 제와 치마 아니 티바치 밀렘 주바게 아니 땡 켜버지 얘기 아니 체도 아니 메가 좁은 거 초좀나 써와라 아니 배수제 다 뒤선 거라 이 말이야 와 체디 단전이가 첼라로 뭐 일하고 뭐 체디 나시도
So then in the first half of this fourth verse, where it says, leisure and fortune are hard to find, life's not long, think it constantly, stop desire for this life. Here in these two lines, all of these various points from the Lam Rim come up. So identifying the leisure and fortune that we have right now, recognizing how difficult it is to find and how greatly meaningful it is. And that leads us to then recognize that in order to be able to continue along the path, we need to get a good body in the future. So this turns us away from the affairs of just this life, or concern with only the attachments that we have to this life, to looking to the future, that if we want to continue to be able to practice, we need to get a good body, and we need to be able to, we do that by accomplishing the proper kinds of causes. So all of these various points of contemplation that arise in the Lam Rim are here within those two lines of the text.
어디 저 중에 남지 이런 말로 다 로장도에 서로 치 되게 요중
So everything that's come up until now are the contemplations for the being of small scope, everything that came in that first half of the verse 4.
다니와 깨와 침이 이와 침이 나셔 도주 되라 다 지부 진다 통화라 로장도에 말레고아래 다 렌데 밀루 코베 동안 남 양야섬네 침이 나셔 도 세다 다데 가사슈와 나신천이 렌데 삼바데 지부 진라 마자야 남도 나가서 라린 가솔 아니 지부 총을 야자 제외 된데 라제와 치마 렌데 밀루 코베 동안 나 침이 나셔 도 봐 라치마를 참바단 자신라서 코주더비 리론저서 내다 여자 필순수비 디지상보치 중냠노 양바데 치매 나셔레스 저와 치마 안에 참바다 자신라서 와그베 제니 라이 내수 제디 아니 론제다 내다 여자 필숨서비 아니 대지 필숨사와지 전화 양바데 아니 치매나셔래 군로 삼장지 된 자주 삼로 매바 치도 잡아 삼장의 된도 아니 배아 가서래 거버 주지 그 삼로 매바 군로 삼장지 된 자주 삼로 매바 다시도 깨나 동안 민요에서 내가 진짜 우리지 깨나 동안 민요에 라니 끼버지 오냐바 오냐바 초양 대양 안에 대 파대나 치미 나셔가 완도 좋아래 다시도 더바지 이나양 하세요 와 그노 섬장 그 다시도 깨니 섬장 그 전지그 살로 다는 매화체 다시도 깨나 라 동안 민요바다 라니 끼버지 오냐바 소양 아니 치매 나셔기 안도 좋아 로저리 송아래 치매 나셔 야
So then, beginning in the second half of the verse, are the contemplations for the being of middling capacity. And as I said yesterday, normally karma, cause and effect, is discussed in the traditional Lamrim structure in the contemplations for being of small scope. But here in the three principal aspects, it goes with this contemplation of those for middling scope, or here in this second half of the verse. So this brings us to the teaching on how to stop desire for one's future lives, which is this next step in developing renunciation. So what is meant by this desire for future lives, or putting one's hopes into future lives that is trying to be reversed here, is the kind of attitude where you think to yourself, I hope in my future births I can live like some godlike being, such as the creature they call Pure One and 100 Gift, or like one of those wheel emperors who rule the entire world. May I live in some wonderful state of happiness, in the best of places, with the best of things, with a beautiful body and everything I wish for at my fingertips. So here, one is wanting to get good things in the future, to have a good place of birth, to have a good body, to have all sorts of possessions and wealth and so forth. And here, this is, we can see that these individuals would not have any sense of wanting to work for others. They're only thinking about good things for themselves in the future. So, incidentally, we also see people who pray to be born in one of the truly pure realms of a Buddha, where they will never have to suffer and can enjoy everlasting happiness. But they pray so without any intention of reaching this high state in order to help other beings. So, really, in the end, these people are only wishing for their own good and for their own good in a future life. And so they've slipped into this basic wanting for good things in their future lives. They haven't really given rise to renunciation.
Oh yeah, that's my 로저도 나야스 라브린 다다 시와네 라브린도 찌우 충의 렌데지 체디당 찌우 충의 렌데지 체디당 체디라 나시 렌데 샤바 그 체디라 나샤도 줘라 샤 링기 아니 치매 나샤 도수도 손장 찌우 충의 렌데지 체디당 찌우 링기 치매 나샤 도수도 손장 람조당 람조들 다시 시원하시 단조다 미다바게 안에 체제 나셔 도바다 렌데 사바다당 코이 동아 삼바니 송든 저바게 안에 치면 나셔 도베 도다수 숨비 내지 가르에서나 렌데 처신 차와 임베 코이도 코와라 때나 마다나 라야 안에 가서래 디베 데비 안에 코와다 이네 지니 코와라 도발라 머리 베꾸네라위 레지 아니 가서 레지를 타다 도고와 티왕도 잡아래 야
So, as I said before, in the standard text on the steps of the path to Buddhahood, the principles of action and their consequences, or karma, cause and effect, come in the section for practitioners of a lesser scope in order to stop our desire for this present life. So the instructions for people of a medium scope, then, are meant to help us stop desire for a future life. But here, in the teaching on the three principal aspects of the path, we're advised to meditate on the leisure and fortune, as well as impermanence, in order to stop desire for this life. So the kind of contemplations that came in that first half of the verse, identifying leisure and fortune and thinking about death and impermanence and so forth, are all to stop desire for this life. Our desire for future lives is to be stopped by a combination of understanding the principles of action and their consequences and contemplating the various sufferings of cyclic life. So these contemplations then correspond with those of a person of middling sort of scope, and it is by thinking about action, karma, cause and effect, and as well as the sufferings within samsara, all of the various sufferings within samsara, that one turns away from the desires of future lives. So this is for a reason. This is making an important point. And the first is that since the forces of action and consequence are so extremely subtle, the consequences of any misdeed will wheel one back into the circle of life if one fails to make a complete escape from the cycle first. So in order to defeat samsara, one must stop each and every action you perform, which is motivated by ignorance. So this contemplation on karma and the subtlety of all of their effects, it comes up at this point in the sort of trainings for the being of middling capacity, in order to turn away from attachment to samsara at all.
Oh yeah, 大家看说的，连着旧经的着。就真了满家过来的，大等的的送送，俺这边这部考了考完堂是，今天只考完的是呢，俺这考完了多少钱吧啦，俺这看说的，没人别过年了，别来几日他咋多过来是吧？他们没人别过年了的，俺这看说的给每个给派几个来啥，来的啥吧啦的呢，来的俺这大家那么些定都过呢。天安尼天的虽然个说大的，安尼可以叫我对不对？考完人把心都考过了一张，你可以叫我的多把钱吧啦，安尼来的多过的，有这个来的多过的，来的多把钱吧啦，来的贵人我这个马里巴多过哇。马里巴多过哇，一张天王的钱呢，今年考完了多把啦，马里巴贵人那边来几日他打，谁来几日谁来干啦，安尼打给没给来，哦，你来他多过哇，天天都在把人是，
So the reasoning here for presenting this discussion of karma, of actions and their result at the time of the being of middling capacity is in order to turn away from samsara altogether, recognizing that it is actions, karma, that when we carry out actions due to the force of our ignorance, those place imprints upon our mental consciousness, which then ripen into the results of those karmas. So recognizing that one needs to reverse karma, turn away from karma in order to completely extricate oneself from the cycle of samsara, this being then of middling capacity then recognizes that it is this ignorance which is motivating these actions, which needs to be stopped in order to put a stop to cyclic existence. So in order to escape the circle of life, or samsara, one must take up white actions and abandon black actions. But to do that at all, you need to believe in the power of karma. And here, someone who is practicing wishing to gain a liberation from samsara, this practitioner recognizes that not only do you need to turn away from karma or reverse karma, but also one needs to reverse the ignorance which is motivating that karma in order to be able to stop this cycle of repeatedly taking rebirth.
오야 준전 대나 다 코알라 도발라 아니 가서래 레디 레사바데다 도고야 임바레 대나 코알라 타발라 까나기 레라 아니 랑도 쳐고 그래 까나기 레라 코알라 타발 쳐발라 아니 까보 개벨레당 아나보 미게벨 레니 이 유베나나 편제 개벨레라 때네 아니 된지리 된 두베당 편집 미게 빌라라 때네 아니 가서래 아니 미게 빌라라 때네 아니 안지 아니 그 리된 두베 인자 되나 코와 타발라 까나길 랜데 라 랑도 그 세리 미게 빌레 나보 미게 빌레 빠와다 까보 개벨레 아니 바 양소난 거베 대셈 대라 안에 가려 거래서나 토마 랜델레 이치비 이치고 그거리세와 랜델레 이치비 이제 마음에나 안에 다 랑도라 주바데 명화이자 대라 토마 랜델레 이치비 이치고 대랑에라 안에 랜델 삼바데 거세
So, in order to get out of this cycle of samsara, one needs to properly practice abandoning those non-virtuous actions and taking up or engaging in white virtuous actions. So, as it says here, then one needs to engage in the proper sort of practice of doing the things that one should do and abandoning those things that one should not do. So, here where it says white actions, this is those karma which are virtuous, propelling one forward that are virtuous actions, and abandon black actions or non-virtuous actions that are throwing one forward in samsara. But in order to take up that practice of abandoning non-virtue and engaging in virtue, one has to first believe in the law of actions and consequences at all. And so to do this, you have to contemplate actions and their results, karma, cause, and effect, in order to gain a kind of confident faith in that which causes you to affect your behavior.
오야 다 렌자 삼주 간데레서나 아니 산제지 레데라 아니 가서 레데 질산바다 체라산바 센터 연구하는 시당 나 딜라 데니사자 맞아 레데 질산바데라 아니 산제지 랭에와 랭에위추 랭에위추 세네가나 아니 개미기 위레라 아니 대부 디디소선 해봐 그봐 아니 레페셔와 세가나 아니 그위레 참모지기지장 아니 대부 폐와면 대부 빠두면 받지 대부 망부침바 미그웨레 참모지양 대부 동안 망부침바 레페셔와 레 마셔봐다 마셔봐서 되게 아니 그웨레 마셔봐라 아니 그웨레지 대부 대와다 미쳐봐 미그웨레 마셔봐라 미그웨레지 대부 농하다 미쳐봐 레체 저와 취미사와 세데 레 그위레다 미그위레 칸디지 그위레지 세와지이나 그위레데 아니 콘트롤라 소베 맞좀나 아니 그위레지 더우 남이지 더우 나와르 쳔바 미그위레지 세와지이나 미그위레데 녀부터시 샤바라 소베 아니 녀부터시 샤바 마제나 아니 미게 빌레지 남이 이러고 동안 내가 침바인자 내 차와 취면서 취 원에 아 송바남 10도 삼나
So the contemplation on karma, on actions and their consequences, is done by considering very carefully the four principles of action which the Buddha enunciated. So first is that karma is definite. So like certain. So when we think that here it says actions are certain to produce similar consequences, here what this is referring to is the fact that virtuous actions will always lead to a result of happiness or contaminated happiness, and suffering or non-virtuous actions will always lead to a result of suffering. The cause and the result are definite. There is a definite relationship with them, between them. And then the second is that consequences are greater than the actions, or we could say this as karma becomes greatly magnified. So if one undertakes a particular action, the force of that, the results that will come from that are stronger. They increase from the action that we have done. And the next point is that one cannot meet a consequence if he has not committed the action. So if you have not, for example, engaged in non-virtuous actions, one can't meet with the results of suffering. So, or if one hasn't done a virtuous action, there's no way to meet with the result of happiness from that. One can't meet with results unless one has done the action previously. And then the fourth point is that once an action is committed, the consequence cannot be lost. Or we could say that the karmas don't lose their ability to bring forth results, unless, of course, in the case of virtuous karma, they are destroyed through something like a very powerful non-virtuous mind, like anger. Or in the case of non-virtuous actions that we have committed, their results can be sort of made not to come forth through engaging in the process of confession and using the 4 opponent powers in order to purify that negative karma. So once an action is committed, the consequence cannot be lost, but it could be destroyed through a moment of anger or purified through the 4 opponent powers.
가서 미주바 타제 아니 드니 랭에 위사가라 아니 레페체와 삼지 잠바 개와 참어지 이나야 아니 두 칸도당 미개와 충어지 이나야 아니 뽕 칸도 쳐야 돼 레페체와 삼바기 아니 페체와다 레 마제와다 미제바 세가라 마제바다 메세 레 개와 찌도 차고와 탁제바다 미개와 싸와네 미셔바 탁제바다 저와 취미사바 삼들 가나 아니 가서 개와 충우지 이나야 아니 컨트롤라서 맞아 미좀 봐라 아니 매바다 아니 미개와 충우지 이나야 아니 예보도 시관에 아니 샤발라 배바 저와 취미사바 오 배바 취미사바 삼바기 아니 데리송 거에 말해
So once a person has gained a well-founded belief in these principles, you will automatically, in your daily life, avoid doing wrong things and begin doing right things. So by contemplating the fact that karma is certain, one makes a resolution that one is only going to engage in virtuous actions and going to avoid at all costs engaging in non-virtuous action. And with the second contemplation, the fact that consequences are greater than the actions, one then thinks that, well, even small non-virtues are something that I need to avoid because the actions are or the consequences, the results are increased from the actions that one has done. So one comes to a resolution that I will, even the small virtues, I will strive to accomplish those, and even those small non-virtues I will seek to avoid at all costs. And then the third contemplation, that you can't meet with the consequence of an action that you haven't completed. There, one resolves that, well, I will not engage in non-virtuous actions so that I don't have to meet with those consequences. And then on the other hand, that one will definitely work to do virtuous things. And finally, then once an action is committed, the consequence cannot be lost. By thinking about this point, one then comes to determine that one will not let one's virtuous actions, for example, be destroyed by a strong non-virtue like a moment of anger. And similarly, when one has engaged in non-virtues, one will then make an effort to purify by means of the 4 opponent powers.
오야 아니 숨바나 십도 삼나 렌데레 이지지 대바제데 아니 가서래 대회 미개위 내지 제부라 대부 동아 중화 인장 아니 미개위 내 방자 방화탕 개위 내를 때는 도 안대와 중화 인장 안 개위래 냥소 나야 그 랑도지 라련 쳐봐 아니 렌데 삼발을 때는 라시죠 그래 와 나 된다 디 내가서 남자 내가서 매나야 라브링 내가서 간디 와래서나다 디 남자 내가서 안지 동아 삼바탕 아니 저완이 지den치마 지대주가 저완이 대두 삼바세게 안지 동아 삼야탕 담발을 주고 잠들어서 라브링도 송바다 디 매와인장 다디 카카는 마 송야딘 바리 와 라브링도 미다비 와서래 미다비 예수 나송습니다. 잠들어서 걸 송신이세. 슌디 공바야 라브리 나시 카카네 량조의 냠술렘바 나시잖아. 라브리 나시 냠술렘 거와 인다. 아니 슌디 냠술렘바 라양 아니 미다비 예수 아니 가소레 사람 아니 동아 삼바당 아니 잠도 마 아니 다 냠술렘 거보다 다 서로지 마송기도 와.
So once one has a kind of confident faith in karma, then automatically recognizing that virtue is going to bring happiness and non-virtue is going to bring suffering, one then will naturally strive to do virtuous actions and avoid non-virtuous actions. One will automatically sort of take up what it is that is to be practiced and avoid what it is that one should avoid. Now, in the stages of the path to Buddhahood, these Lamrim texts, the instruction on impermanence is followed by sections that treat the three lower births and how to go for refuge. So again, according to the Lamrim kind of outlines as they generally appear, one, after having contemplated the death and impermanence, then thinks about the sort of nature of the future life that one might take, this kind of happiness of certain existence and the suffering of other types of existence, and then thinks about the sort of methods for achieving happiness in the future by going for refuge, as well as generating this kind of faith in karma and results. And so here, these are not explicitly laid out, but it is sort of the intent of the text to present those topics as well. So they will be sort of supplemented in here. Here we will weave in some of these points from the stages of the path, which is also the intent of the text at hand. So the three principles, these are sort of implicit within them, the stages of thinking about refuge and so forth.
Oh yeah, that is 주셔 주나서 순디야 공부따를 라브리 공부따를 다를 라루냐 카카네 공 주셔 주나서 다치 공도 아니 치와미다 바삼네 치와미다 바삼네 아니 란 치위 오도 남세대 아니 치마 로고라 마도 아니 맘에 시와다를 아니 가서 맘에 시와다를 매봐 아니 맘에 시와다 매봐 민주와 교화시라고 했으면 다 맘에 시와 나시면 매봐 민주와 랑이 아니 가서래 교화시량고 그래서 나봐 시와다 맘에 시와다 매봐 민주와 주미 시봐 아니 교화시량고 시레스 교화 제서 대라 아니 안도데 된로니라 맞아봐 리바치마 참 좋고와 인장 리바데 담맘 제가 치마는 좋고 와라 제사들라 아니 안도데 된로니라 맞아봐 와 된로니 괜히 강제와데 라라라와 요나다 된로지 아니 안도 미제와요 맞아와 초그레데 되네 매봐 괜히 강라 제와라 라라 매 라라 라와 매봐 다 내가나 그 제수라는 저 제고래 와 레게위세 게벨레지사유나니 아니 덴줄리덴 아니 덴로니 잠죠 미게벨레지사와이나니 안로 니점 저니 저주인 바레 오 라메 발레지세스 조고웨 아니 게베 덴로당 미게베 안로 판바데 따뜻하상 소환하시체니 지den동아 가세 데나 순두가 미게발라 동아숑 루루케 미게와라 동아주 지신 안로 탐제도 게라 따도 대화야 제와군도 대화 소와나신 레 게미게기 제부텔라 다 된로당 안로 예배 줘야 말이 야 안로 팬발라 담 안로 맨도 된로당 안로 팬 개야 안에 다 알아서 저거이나 아니 개와 주바리 신도 꿰바당 미게와야는 앙암수지 주바 개와지 두기 이나야 안에 갈사라 정어지서 마상와 저와예라 되네매바 남다시 매바 미게와지나 안에 배 정어지서 창와지 벤지배 주소 장창와지 주바 인상 파제 미게위 대부 안에 안로제 그마 대랑 미게와 대라양 아니 가서를 미게와 첨복이 이야와 등기 이다 아니 가서를 충옥이 아니 된로제야 야.
So here, the points from the other from the stages of the path will be sort of woven in to the commentary on these three principal aspects of the path. And so after you die, your consciousness doesn't just go out like a lamp. You must take another birth. So our consciousness isn't just extinguished at the time of death, but rather it continues on. We have to take another rebirth, and that rebirth is based upon the kind of karma that we have accumulated over our past lives. So if we had the kind of autonomy to be able to choose where we were going to go, whether it was a happier rebirth or a lower rebirth, we would all automatically choose to go after a happier rebirth. But unfortunately, it's not the case that we get to have that kind of autonomy. Rather, we follow after. We're sort of thrown by the karma that we have accumulated. So as for the future births that we can take, there's only two kind of choices, going to a happier migration or a birth in the lower realms. And so here, this follows after the karma that we have done. So as for which of the two out of a births of misery or happier rebirths, as for which of the two you do take, you are totally helpless. You must follow the direction of your past actions. So virtuous actions throw you into one of the happier types of birth, and non-virtuous actions throw you into one of the three of misery. So you're propelled by your karma into a future rebirth, and this is not something that we have really control over in any way. It tends to be that when we engage in non-virtuous actions, we have all three sort of stages are fully non-virtuous, as in our motivation, the actual carrying out of that action, and the conclusion of that action. Whereas for virtues, it's very difficult for us to have all three of these present, a good motivation, carrying that through the actual action, and then into the conclusion of that. So the force of our non-virtues tends to be much stronger. Now, as far as the way that karma propels us, greater non-virtue will propel us into the lower realms. So a large non-virtuous action will lead to a birth in the hell realms. A kind of middling non-virtuous action can lead us to a birth as a hungry ghost. And a lighter non-virtue can lead us to take birth as an animal. But whatever birth we take is determined by those actions we've accumulated.
Oh yeah, that le gewa da meke be le yi yu be na na ani le gewa de la ani sonam dengong gewe le miyo khang sonam mi yo sonam dengong gewe la miyo khoma le ji yin sai ga la sonam ji le dang ani sonam ma yin bi le dang ani miyo bi le che ni da le sum sha go de 내 대응도와 충을 던져지스 내 개와 친비 세dem 아니 묘일에서 강고만이 제저그 편집을 해야 되라 내 개와 친 묘일에 개와 친부 묘일에디 고만이 지하 수다 수매게 라게 아니 징그 대비하라 너다 대비하다 미 제대라 다지 내가 준데 가나 개회실에 첨부당 증당 송병을 다 쏘는 길에 소남 딩게 데비사 소남 그 레라 첨부 체주마 손 이사이가라 미오빌라 되게 아니 강고만 지켜와다 소남지 레 딩게 데비사다 소남지 레 충옥이 되바게 밀게와 대박 미쳐봐 인생 다 소나 많이 빌려다 양 나도 제 두세 대함 다중 룬데데 마 생산이 방글로도 미겨와라 동아지 대신 안로 탐자지 개라 탐자 된로 탐자다 깨바군데 대화 제송 대단하 다시 시원에 라르라 교환이 또 충신세 라 미겨와니 시도 또 채배 아니 개와 두바지 이나야 아니 정어 주스 마사마다 미거바지 이나 정어 주스 차와 또 차바지 인장 아니다 또 채배 티깅 안에 치디가나 아니 안돌레면도 메줘서 매봐 그와 친하니 치망 안돌 깨와 다 쳐버려 야
So then, as it says here, the types of virtuous actions throw you into happier types of birth. Meritorious actions are that which lead to a good kind of birth. Then there are non-meritorious, non-virtuous actions which lead one to take a bad sort of rebirth. And then there are actions which we call as being non-moving or invariable actions that bring about birth in the form and formless realms. So here then this text says that great non-virtues lead you to the hells, medium ones lead you to birth as a hungry ghost, lesser non-virtues make you take rebirth as an animal. Great virtuous actions, on the other hand, bring you birth as a pleasure being in one of the two higher realms. Medium virtues make you a pleasure being of the desire realm, and lesser virtues bring a birth as a human in the same realm. And so these, as I quoted before, Nagarjuna says then that non-virtue brings all suffering and the births of misery. Virtue brings all happier births and happiness in all one's births. So this is the sort of principles of karma articulated in how they bring us to taking another state. So this is the situation that we are in, and since it is the case, since all the virtues you and I have are feeble, while all our non-virtues are ever so mighty, then if we were to die in our present condition, it's a foregone conclusion that we would take birth in one of the realms of misery. So here again, when it comes to non-virtuous actions, it tends to be the case that we have all three present, the sort of motivating factor, we carry that through the actual action and to the conclusion of that action. Whereas when we try to engage in virtue, it's much more sort of feeble or weak. We don't necessarily have a good preparation, motivation. We don't necessarily carry that through the action or conclude it well. So the strength of our non-virtues is so much stronger that if we were to die at this time before we begin to practice, it's a foregone conclusion. It's decided that we would be going to the lower realms.
Oh yeah, thế ta ngày xong rồi chia sẻ, anh nhà vào là才当做这了说话，他看上去啊那些钱呢，我这不就才行，长话也nhà vào我你们就行长，这公他给人把一大大家长把钱，这个这不就才行长话也nhà vào我就行长，你们就行长这个了，参加完年了，俺这参与动啊。安尼参加完了，安尼卡说的参与动啊，安尼参加节，但我这里一大，这些官别动话个一大，但说话呢，这里定规把的，俺说的节日年完了说话，茶场做事了说话汤是，然后这些官把也一大大家全把掐是一个啦，一大了这我们当俺就来说话就不汤。아니 몽베동아 라마위 텐도사자 참바차 시간세 텐도라 렌시 띵무보당 아니 고제라 소와게 아니 동아살라 메바 어테자게 아니 다 내송그 동아 차장 저금 아시 투비 아니 동아자 마 삼게 아니 동아 삼바
So, taking our birth in one of these realms, we would meet unbearable suffering. So, there are verses that articulate this, talking about if we should recall the sort of sufferings of hell beings. If we're born in the hells, we experience extreme heat and cold and so forth. It would be unbearable to us. So, there are different types of hells: the hot hells, the cold hells, sort of temporary hells. But as hell beings, there would be unspeakable heat or cold. Our bodies would be boiled or scorched and more. So we should recall these great sufferings of what it is to be born as a hell realm. If we were born as a hungry ghost, we would always be hungry or thirsty in a constant state of exhaustion and fear. So again, there are versified forms of this talking about recalling the sufferings of hungry ghosts and all of the sort of physical sufferings that they undergo, of fear, of being extremely tired, of hunger and thirst and so forth. And then there is the state of being an animal. And as animals, we would be mindless brutes, incapable of saying a thing, exploited by humans for their work or food. So if one takes a rebirth as an animal, we would end up in a state where we lack intelligence, are sort of forced into various types of work, exploited by others, and have to fear for our life and so forth.
오야 대답이 나서도 미주에 탑수 군조섬라 이내 just 저세다 어디 동아 대다라 태니 등아 대다라 교위 뉴바디 아니술라 요아래 사나 아니다 가서를 라마 군조섬라 여바디 이치고 거네 동아 대다라 교위 뉴바 라마 군조섬라 여바 이치고 거네 아니 군조섬라 아라니 해송그 동아라 지신 짜네 대래 교빈데 라마 꾸졌음라 여봐 20여 건에 기도령에 가르치 있나요 라마 꾸졌음 뭐 체라라 체냐벼 건에 아니 잡수 들어와대라 라마 집에 가서 나서 동안 바이 미제네 니네 꾸졌음라 잡조신 세요 디봉께서 타다 들발라 점바 훈련 주바 친절로 써야 된다 두선 거 아래
So here then, thinking about the sufferings of these various states of the lower realms then, there is a way to avoid these births of misery, and this is to turn ourselves over to the three jewels for their protection, and to do so from the bottom of our hearts. So here, recalling this sort of having fear at the various sufferings that one would have to endure in the lower realms, with that in mind, one then turns to the triple jewel, looking and seeing that this is someone that can be of protection. This is the only kind of protection from those sufferings. And having that kind of confident faith in the ability of the three jewels to protect you, you take up this attitude of refuge, thinking that I will go for refuge to the three jewels, no matter what might come, no matter what might arise. So this begins, again, by having thinking about the sufferings of the lower realms. As it says in the Guru Puja, aghast at the searing blaze of suffering in the lower realms, we take heartfelt refuge in the three precious gems and seek your blessings that we may eagerly endeavor to practice the various means for abandoning what is bound to misfortune and accumulating virtuous deeds. So here, going for refuge to the triple gem also involves choosing correctly what we should undertake, what we should practice, and what we should avoid. So we'll stop there for now.